Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest this morning is Ellis Goldstein. Ellis has been with CRU for a number of years, and we have been friends for, I think, at least 7 or 8 years now. We get to run into each other every now and then, and Ellis lives in Orlando. So Ellis, my friend, welcome back to the podcast. You've been on here before.
I have, and it's just an honor, and it's really, I consider a privilege to be asked back. And so thanks for having me.
Well, if we didn't like you, this wouldn't be happening. So.
I thought about that
too. Well, thank you again for being a part. Of course, you have been with CRU for a number of years, but your primary claim to fame, if I remember right, is way back in the day when you were raising support, you actually hitchhiked to a support raising appointment. Is that right?
No, I did. When I was still in college, I bought a car, couldn't afford much, and it was a Ford. And you remember the old acronym for Ford was Fix or Repair Daily at that time.
Yes.
And so it was a Ford Comet. Probably nobody knows what it is. The only thing that was famous about the Ford was its motor. And so this particular one. And so one day I went out there to start it, and the thing was just dead. I only paid $350 for it when I bought it, so that says something about it. And I was determined to raise my support, and so at that time I only knew one way, and that was I stuck out my thumb and I hitchhiked to support appointments, and I did that for a bit, and then a gracious partner loaned me their Ford Mustang, and I didn't know at the time what a great car that was or would become in history.
Right.
So.
Wow. Well, I do appreciate the stick-to-itiveness of finding any way to get to those support raising meetings, but I do have to say on behalf of SRS, we don't advocate hitchhiking to your support raising meetings.
I don't either.
Well, no, but I always love that story though, because quite honestly, it took some focus and resolve to go, I got to get there. And I remember I had a wife and 4 kids when I started, 3 kids, almost 4 kids when I started raising support, and realizing that they had to eat and I had to have partners in order to make that happen. And that definitely caused me to have some 5 a.m. meetings and some 11 at night meetings and stuff like that, because I had to do what it took to build my team. So I definitely remember that feeling and that focus. But fortunately, Ellis, you and I are both fully funded Great Commission workers. Not that we never need to raise support anymore, because things change, budgets go up, supporters have to drop off. But generally speaking, on the daily, you and I are both fully funded Great Commission workers, and thankful to be so. And today's topic, of course, is kind of a sensitive one, because in some ways we need to kind of lean in on this conversation of politics in support raising. And more specifically, Ellis, if you recall, when I had sent you an email, I had asked you to help me just kind of discuss raising support when people want to know where you or the organization stands politically. And, we're both Americans, and of course, people listen to this on a global scale. But Ellis, do you think it's fair if I were to characterize America as being pretty divided politically right now?
It absolutely is. Yep.
Yeah. So, where do you think we should even start this conversation? Because I think it's an important one to have.
One of the things that we do know that has taken place, I think over the years and the recent years, is where Christians are associating certain parties that like one party is more Christian than another, and And there's these conversations that if you were a Christian, you wouldn't vote this way, or if you were a Christian, you wouldn't vote that way.
Mm.
And as Christians are as divided over. It seems that Christians are as divided over these kinds of issues, even more so than let's say fulfilling the Great Commission.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really does feel that way, and I got some theories as to why that's true. I'm sure you do as well. And yet I don't want to run down that road too far. The reality is, I believe the bulk of the people that will listen to this podcast, they are raising support, or maybe they're already fully funded. Perhaps they coach and train others that raise support, but they're a lot of times looking for, how do I address this? How do I bring this up, or how do I not bring this up, or do I need to let people know where I stand? And there can be a lot of confusion in that. And I'll share with you just to kind of give you by way of example. There's a person that I respect in ministry. I respect the work that he does, because he does it for the kingdom. But politically, Ellis, he and I are probably approaching things differently, and I think that's a gracious way of saying it. So I would actually consider him and I to be friends. I like his work; he likes my work. But honestly, Ellis, every day, 2-3 times a day, there was a period in time when he was just trashing on a political level some of the things that I saw quite differently than him, and unbeknownst to him, it actually began to drive a wedge between us, because I started losing respect for him, because every time I opened social media, I saw him attacking somebody politically. And again, this is a person I liked as a person, Ellis, and I actually even respected the work that he was doing for the kingdom. But Ellis, I reached a point where I just straight up unfriended him. I didn't want to see that stuff when I did open Facebook or Instagram. And I don't know if I handled that right or wrong, to be quite honest. We didn't have a good enough relationship where I could go sit down with him and have coffee. He lives in a different part of the country. But that's always kind of bugged me, that I felt the need to do that. And then afterwards, I actually felt glad about it, because I didn't have to read his stuff anymore. It wasn't challenging me to think differently. It was just kind of offending me, and I don't want to be offended easily. And anyway, so that's kind of my situation. Maybe you've had a situation that you'd be willing to share with our audience, that where you weren't really quite sure about what was going on with some of the political stuff coming maybe from yourself or from somebody that you know that's in ministry.
I've seen that with. I took on a role for a short time with our ministry of responding to questions that would come in.
Okay.
And and some of these questions, I think the reason some of them were coming in is because people would voice certain opinions that say about our ministry on social media. And many times some of the things that were said were inaccurate. And so you would have, there was other reasons that you'd have the people that support the ministry would get in touch with us, write letters, and I would talk with some of our staff members. And I think that one of the hardest things for me, and it's part of my personality, and that is that when people become so divided over, they have strong opinions about things, that at one point, Aaron, I felt just like you, saying, I really am not enjoying this part of this responsibility I was given in the ministry. I was asked to do, and answering questions. And so I said, I would rather not do this anymore. It was, I just hate the divide that occurs. But it doesn't mean that the questions don't need to be answered. But yes, I do. I really understand. I think I really understand how you felt.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess part of the point in bringing that up, Ellis, is I think the experience of this interaction, we need to dig into that a little bit. So first of all, let's just talk about let's talk about wisdom. You and I, of course, we didn't pre-rehearse this conversation, but one of the things that we did talk about just briefly is as a communicator, as an emissary of the gospel of Jesus Christ, as a missionary, as a church planter, as a Bible translator, whatever the listener's role is in kingdom work, they need to communicate. They need to communicate about how people are supposed to be praying, what God is doing with their gifts, what God has done as a result of their prayers and their gifts, like all that kind of stuff. And so communication happens, but there's a real need for wisdom when we kind of switch tracks and we touch on things a little more, particularly if it's political. And Ellis, one of the questions I have is, do we need to always talk about the politics or ever? And then the flip side is, what do we do with when people say, well, if you're not standing up and letting people know how it goes, you're part of the problem. So, we kind of have some extremes and some ditches. So talk with me a little bit about wisdom. Where does wisdom come in all of this?
Well, as I shared with you earlier, this is something that even this morning, that the Lord prompted me with this. And I was thinking about wisdom. And I was thinking about in the scriptures some of the words that are associated with it. But let me back up one moment before I answer that one, and which will lead to talking about wisdom. By nature, I am a person that when I see a problem, it could be something within our ministry. It could be something in a conversation with my wife. Or I see something broken. I want to fix it. And I realized a short time ago that sometimes my desire to fix something was overpowering my judgment of whether I should say something or not. And I'm just talking about not about politics, just about some other topic. That sometimes my opinion wasn't really all that needed, and yet I felt like at times I'm driven by wanting to give my opinion and wanting to. No, I see what you're saying, but I think you should see it this way and not that way. And I was challenged, and I think this was from the Holy Spirit, and I was challenged. It was, Ellis, is your opinion really needed here? Is what you're thinking, is it all that important? And what I walked away with from that time was that sometimes in certain situations, I can't see clearly. And I have to be willing to admit that my viewpoint perhaps isn't the only viewpoint. And I'm not even talking about politics. I'm just talking about some other things in life.
Right.
And so I was looking at a couple of verses in Scripture. In Proverbs 19:11, it says, "A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense." And then 1 Kings 4:29. Referring to Solomon, God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. The words that are associated with wisdom are patience, insight, discernment. I feel that sometimes that, and I feel that what the Lord is showing me is that even though that I might have an opinion about something, that what wisdom requires is me to be patient before giving the answer, or even giving an answer. That it requires that I have more insight than I normally have, and that it requires discernment, and that and discernment means that sometimes that's an intuitive sense. Sometimes that means gathering more information, and I've realized that wisdom requires me to wait before speaking, and that was one of the areas I think that God has been causing me to grow in, and just saying to me, Ellis, I have created you in a certain way, and you do have wisdom that I've given you, but sometimes you speak sooner than you should, and that you don't have all the information, even though that you feel that your opinion is so important. And so as I thought about that, I think that is that people, that especially those in Christian work, as they're responding to questions that are asked of them, really need to exercise not just wisdom, but the patience that goes along with it, and not be too quick to answer.
Right.
So that's how I'd respond to that about patience, about wisdom.
Yeah, that's good. Maybe you can think of another, but I'm thinking that oftentimes the opportunities to open our mouth, and maybe we don't need to, can happen like when you're sitting down with somebody, you're physically with them. Of course, it can happen like over the phone or a Zoom call or whatever else. And then probably the other way that most frequently that can happen is over social media.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can unpack all of those, but at the end of the day, having wisdom, like what you just described, that covers all three of those. It's not one of those that you don't need wisdom. But I think for the support raisers, let's talk about that just briefly about those three areas. How might that look, first of all, for somebody that's in a support raising appointment, and perhaps there's a temptation, if not an actual question about something politically that comes up. So Ellis, put yourself in those shoes, in that theoretical, but I mean, it's an actual situation, where somebody's in a support raising appointment, and maybe they even come so far as right out to say it and say, well, you only vote for X political party, right? How would you handle that?
I think one thing that a Christian worker needs to do is to find out, does the organization for whom I work have some policies and guidelines about how we are to respond to questions. When I joined CRU, I have one of the things that I am committed to, and that I need to be committed to, is that we have some guidelines and that help us with in a variety of situations, but even when it comes to political things, that there are some things that I need to be aware of in how I respond to questions that are being asked, and part of that is that I have to remember that while I have personal opinions, I represent our ministry, and what I say reflects on the ministry. My personal opinions reflect on the ministry. And so when I answer, I need to be aware of, is my ministry given us any wisdom, any guidelines with how to respond? So I think that's one thing to find out. So before opening mouth, find out what the guidelines might be within your ministry. Mm-hmm. I think another thing that a person that we need to do is that when whether a prospective partner asks a question or a current partner asks a question, someone who's supporting our ministry, we need to ask the question. I'm not saying to ask them this question, but we need to ask the question, why are they asking this question? What has prompted them to ask the question? Has it been something that they have seen on social media? Has it been something that they read in a magazine? Is it, or is it just a question that they were just wondering about? Has it been something that they're asking because they had a conversation with somebody else and who said, "Did you know that this particular organization feels this way about that?" And the other thing that you have to discern is whether the information that may be causing them to ask that question, was it accurate or not?
Yeah.
So we can't just be so quick to answer. We need to make sure that we are really responding to that we're answering in the best way possible.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the organizational response, but it's for some people that don't have an organization that would actually help them with that. Perhaps it's on you.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps it's on you to be ready for that. And
Yep.
you need to be wise in that as well. And I don't have a quick and easy answer, Ellis, and maybe you have a better thought than I do, but I would almost prepare a statement, if you will, if someone were to bring it up. In fact, what I would say right now, if I was sitting in a coffee shop and someone said, well, you voted for X, right? Or you didn't vote for X, right? I would quickly go, you know what? I do vote, and I do care about the direction of the United States, and I do pray for my president, whoever the president is. So that would be true of me. But regardless of who I voted for, I want to primarily be about the gospel of Jesus Christ and the kingdom building he's put in front of me. And with that in mind, if it's all right with you, I don't really want to talk politics right now. I want to focus on the life-changing work I get to do through Exago Ministries and in partnership with Support Raising Solutions. And I want to focus on that as the vision. Could we do that? Because politics gets really messy, and so that's what I would do. And if a person doubled down and started saying, well, if you voted for so-and-so, then I can't blah, 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 blah. I think, Ellis, I might reach a point there where I go, maybe this just isn't the person for my team. I wouldn't be dismissive and rude to them, but to me, that might be an indicator that this might be somebody I can never make happy. And maybe they're just not the right person for my team. Yeah, that again, I'm not saying that's the right response. I'm saying that's probably what I would do. What would you do let me rephrase that, Ellis. If somebody, they're in a similar situation, let's say where they don't have an organization that is told them how to respond, how would you suggest they respond in that sort of situation?
Well, Aaron, I don't think I could add much more to what you said. I think that your answer is perfect because what you're doing is that you've shared with the person about things that are important to you. You've indicated that that's not the purpose of your conversation to discuss that, and you've pointed it back to the direction that the conversation needs to go in. There was I'll never forget. There's one person called that I talked to, and all she wanted to know was, "Are you? Is our ministry this party, or which party do you stand behind?" And she said, "I'm Rios." And then she added this to it. She said, I want to assess where I am giving," and that's good. That she wants to do that, but she wanted to do that and use the particular party that an organization might be promoting or standing behind, and use that as our filter for how she was going to discern to give. When you're asked a question like that, it's like it's either or. And my objective, is like you, is that it's the reason that I raise support, the reason I'm in this conversation, is that what I want to be about is fulfilling the Great Commission, and to involve people through their giving and praying with what God is doing. And I'm not negating, I don't want to negate that their questions are not important. First of all, a question like that would be impossible to answer, because I would say that in any missions organization, you're going to have people that have a variety of opinions. Not everybody votes the same way.
Right. So true. Good.
And I think the other thing is, I was just thinking about how would Jesus answer that question? I don't think Jesus would ever identify himself with voting one party or another. I think it's pretty clear in Scripture that he focused on his mission. And I think there's a lot to learn from that. There is a lot that can distract us from what God has called us to.
Yeah.
Yet when people are asking these questions, they are sincere questions. They are, and it's not that their questions are wrong, that they have, but that's not what our focus is.
Yeah. And so back to the idea of, you could have this conversation with somebody personally or over the phone or over like messaging social media. I think what we just said pretty much covers the phone and the personally stuff, but let's go to the social media side, because that tends to be where people might make the most mistakes. Not everybody, but I think a lot of people are going to make a lot of mistakes. And I don't know all the reasons behind all that, but I think some of it is access and how easy it is to reshare something without putting any thoughts into it. In fact, I'll tell on myself. I stepped in it once this last year, Ellis. I really didn't mean to. I was really trying to be funny, and I had to go back and apologize because I thought what I was reposting was 99.9% just funny, and that the odds of it offending anybody was less than 0.1%. And it was one of those. It had to do with the vaccine, and there's a lot of people that were posting about the vaccine, like, I'm anti-vaccine, I'm pro-vaccine. A lot of people were taking a stand. And I think I posted some sort of cover or whatever, my photo, I don't have the words for it, but it said, I don't care. And I just meant it as a joke of, I don't care whether you're vaccinated or not. I love you. I don't care if you're pro-vax, anti-vax, whatever, man. You do you. Like, I really meant it as a very tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. And, unintentionally, I have a dear friend who has a son who's just struggling to be alive. He's very I said it wrong, immunocompromised. And that hurt her. I didn't mean to. That hurt her. And she was like, hey, this means a lot to me. Like, my son can't. My son can't go outside. My son can't be around other kids. Like, I want people to get this. And I won't even get into the debate of the science and who needs to and who doesn't and how that affects others. That's not what we're here for. Right or wrong, I offended her. And that is not the basis of our relationship. She was very gracious with me. But I felt a reality there of, I just kind of weighed in on something politically, and what I meant to be humor and kind of tongue in cheek, there was other people taking that really, really seriously, and that's not what I want to primarily be known for. I don't have the time to dig in and wade through all those waters all the time. Now, Ellis, in that case, I will tell you, I didn't handle that quite so much online. I called her and I had a conversation with her and I apologized to her. But I guess what I'm saying is, I was guilty of even something that a lot of people thought was funny. I was guilty of unintentionally causing some damage, or at least potentially causing some damage in my relationships with people that are ministry partners that care a lot more about Jesus Christ and what we're doing together for the kingdom than some of this other stuff that can be viewed as politically. And so I guess my point in all that, Ellis, is where maybe does that same wisdom you just share, where might that apply just as much or perhaps even a little differently or more when it comes to the social media landscape?
No, that's an excellent question. And I think there's several things, a couple of things that you brought out, which I think are so important. One is first, I really commend you for calling her because you did something in that phone call that responding on social media could never do. The with with responding on social media, there are only so many words you can write, only so many things you can express, and it's not a true dialogue. And so there are some types of conversations that need to be personal, and social media does not lend itself to that kind of conversation well. And that's one of the things that you learn through doing that. Yeah, I've made it a point that I don't voice opinions on social media because that it's only a soundbite. I don't get to give context. It's not where I feel that the dialogue is going to be will be best in that kind of situation. I mean, social media, of course, has its place and can be so powerful. But I think that there has been a blurring in our culture of where good conversation should take place. And social media doesn't always accomplish that. Also, there's a personal conviction that I have that on certain kinds of discussions that I have personally chosen not to write anything about certain opinions. And part of that, I mean, the reason for that is that I represent CRU. Whether it's in my spare time or my off time, or whether it's when I'm on, ministry wise, that what I write on social media, it represents who I am, and that as an ambassador for Jesus Christ, and also is that I represent our ministry. And no matter what the topic might be, I have to be careful because people can perceive, oh, this is Ellis Goldstein, and he is with CRU, and so therefore this must be what CRU believes, and so I have a responsibility about where I post things, what I say. Somebody might say, "Well, Ellis, I didn't sign up for something like that. That's awfully restrictive." And I guess what it comes down to, what I signed up for. I've been with the ministry for 49 years now.
Wow.
And that I made a commitment that I wanted to be an ambassador for Jesus Christ. And I know that some people will say, well, some of these opinions are reflective of my faith. And I do believe that our faith should have an effect on our various opinions. But there is a place to share those things and a place that is best not to share those things.
Yeah.
And I have just made the decision that I am not going to share certain things on social media because of who I represent, and also because there isn't the space to be able to have the dialogue that I would if it was in a personal conversation with my friend Aaron.
Good stuff. Good stuff. One other thing I want to point out, and we've said this in other podcasts, but Ellis, your wisdom here has just kind of reminded me of it, is that no one ever gets into like a thread debate on social media, and at least I've never seen it, where after multiple points and barbs and put downs and snarky comments and all that kind of stuff, I've never seen anybody at the end of it summarize with, "Hey, thanks again for the way you made fun of me and you mocked my position. I've totally changed my mind. You being mean and laughing at my response has caused me to vote differently. Thank you again. Like I've never seen that. And so if there is a need to have a conversation, and in some cases they're not, it's just wiser, it's not necessary. But I'm willing to admit there might be a time where you really do need to have a conversation with someone. It's not going to be on social media. It's going to be one-to-one. Needs to be done in grace and humility and a whole lot of wisdom. And with that in mind, I really hope that most of our listeners don't need to have those conversations, Ellis, because I think they can be super distracting from where their focus needs to be. But in that sort of situation, I would definitely caution people to not blaze forward to seek wisdom from others and for how to handle that situation, particularly if you're with an organization that might have some policies or some encouragements, but to tread carefully. We want to be more about Christ than about being a libertarian or a Republican or a Democrat or whatever organization or political affiliation someone else might have in the U.S. or abroad for that matter. So, well, Ellis, I really appreciate you as always. You are such a wise friend, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's my habit to encourage the guest to kind of have the last final word, so to speak, before we end a podcast. So I am going to give you the microphone one more time, my friend.
Aaron, I feel like I have learned some things from you during this time about how to respond. I realize you're asking me on how to respond. I think that what I would want people to think about is to go back to what God's call for you is, that if you're listening to this podcast, most likely you're a person who has heard from the Lord that has called you into a specific type of ministry, into kingdom work. That as you raise support, what you are doing is that you're in the process of mobilizing people to be involved in the Great Commission, because you want people, every man, woman, and child on this planet, to hear the gospel. And we want to weigh very carefully how we respond to different questions, because what we don't want to do is to have people is for people to walk away from our conversation saying, well, that person really isn't focused on the gospel. It is not that our opinions are not important. And I am not. I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying that your opinion politically on some things is not important. The question is, where should the conversation be taking place? There's some places that it's not appropriate for those conversations to take place. I prefer to have those kinds of conversations with very close friends who understand me. And who understand the nuances. And sometimes when you are asked a question just off the cuff, it's very difficult to really give the context and to help people really understand. We must realize that we represent our organization as we're raising support. And I think that the way that Aaron shared in the beginning about how to respond, I think is very, very appropriate on how to respond. It is okay. I mean, somebody could say, Ellis, what you're saying is that you're not answering their question. I am answering their question. I am not giving them the answer that they may like or prefer, because I want to remain focused on what God has called me to do and not be distracted from that. And that is okay to respond that way. And I think it is healthy to respond that way.
Mm-hmm. Ellis, thank you so much for being a part of the SRS podcast.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.